Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're taking a look at the Vampire Lord. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about it, other than this is a build I do play on live. It is a very fun build, it is a very good solo type build, and it can be very powerful even as a tank, depending on the dungeon you're playing through, or possibly even the trial. And it really comes down to its uniqueness and how it plays. It's a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and take a look at the build. And before I get started, of course, disclaimer, this is a roleplay casual type build. It is not meant for meta play, but it can do 100% of the content in this game. So let's go ahead and get started in looking at the build itself. We are called the Vampire Lord. This is a Khajiit Necromancer build. We have 64 points in the stamina, 18,000 magicka, 29,000 health, 29,000 stamina. We do have a 770 mag recovery with a 1305 stamina recovery, 2453 weapon damage, 1935 spell damage. We do have a 28% spell critical, which isn't really, but we do have a 37% weapon critical, 18,000 spell resist, 17,000 physical resist. We are a stage 4 vampire with this, which we get 75% health recovery loss, 25% damage increased by fire, and our vampire abilities cost 21% less and advance your vampire stage, and then feeding will reduce it. We do use the Thief Mundus Stone to increase our critical chances. We do get minor protection all the time, and then on top of that, we use Tri-Stat food. So going over here to the equipment and stuff, you can use other potions, like you can use warrior power pots or stamina power pots to increase your crit chance and stuff. The one I like to use is one that increases my crit chance, but not my weapon and spell damage, or weapon damage. It increases crit chance and it gives me stamina health return. That's the one I really like to use with this setup. It works out really well, because I don't really have to worry too much about my magic as much as I need to worry about my stamina return. So I do use tripods a lot of the time while I'm playing, and then when it comes to monster sets and everything else, we use Bloodspawn. Bloodspawn's a great set. It gives you a little bit of stamina recovery, which is really nice. And then with the 2-piece, when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 14 ultimate and increase your physical and spell resistance by 6450 for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds, so that's pretty nice for like tanking and stuff, solo playing, that kind of thing. We do use Hunting's Rage. This gives you weapon crit, max stam, weapon crit, and weapon damage. And then on to the jewelry, we're using the Vampire Cloak set. Vampire Cloak is actually a really good set for this build, because as you can see, it gives you max health, it gives you spell damage, max health, and then on the 5-piece, gain minor protection at all times, reducing the damage taken by 8%. Excuse me. The reason why this set's so good, in my opinion, is the fact that you do get that minor protection all the time, and when playing a vampire, it helps reduce that incoming fire damage by quite a bit. So alright, now we're going to go over the enchants and traits on the gear, but we're going to start with enchants. So starting on the bigger pieces, the helm, the chest, and the legs, we are using Tri-Stats, and this is to give us more max magicka, health, and stamina. On the bigger pieces, using the Tri-Stats gives you that more well-rounded, I would say, attribute pool. Now on the smaller pieces, just like with any tank type, I am running 4 max health enchants on the smaller pieces. So the shoulders, the gloves, the belt, and the boots, I am running max health enchants. The reason for this is so this way you have a good health pool for soloing content. That means soloing world bosses, soloing delves, soloing public dungeons, soloing dungeons themselves on normal and veteran. So not all dungeons can be soloed, by the way, on veteran difficulty. The DLC dungeons can be, some of them can be soloed on veteran, but they are very challenging. This build also works really good in VMA. It's not the best, but it can do VMA pretty well. And I do like it for that. So Now moving on to the traits, on the smaller pieces we are using Divines, and this is just to maximize our Mundus Stone use, so we can get that little bit of extra crit capability out of our character, so we can take advantage of a lot of different abilities we have. On top of that, we are using Invigorating on the helm and the legs. This is going to allow us to have a little bit more health, magicka, and stamina recovery. With being a Khajiit, you get that health, magicka, stamina recovery in their passives. This plays into that, and it plays into the fact that you're using the one monster set that gives you stamina recovery as well. So it's really nice. And then on the big piece, the chest piece, we are using Reinforced, and this is just to maximize the resistance value of our chest piece. Now, I will tell you guys this, when your Bloodspawn procs, this will give you, when you have your resistance buff and that, you will be at 30,000. So it's a really nice thing. So here's what the resistances look like, buffed. And then when you get the Bloodspawn, it goes up another 6,900 and something. So it puts you at, this will put you right over 32,000. So, and this one puts you at 31,000. So you're in a really good resistance space, and it makes you a more effective tank. So this build, the Vampire Lord isn't just a solo build, it can also tank content as well, which is really nice. But you do have to do some skill changes. And speaking of skill changes, of course, we will get to those, but I want to go over the rest of the gear here. So the traits are the enchants and traits on the jewelry are really easy. They're not easy to get, but they help out a lot more. So I do run 2 Trirune traits on the jewelry. This gives you that little bit more magicka, stamina, and health. And then, of course, I do run 2 weapon damage enchants here on the rings. This gives me higher weapon damage, which allows me to take advantage of my character's tools that they have. So, moving on to the necklace. On the necklace, we are using a necklace of the Vampire Cloak, infused with a stamina recovery. This infused is going to allow this enchantment to be a little bit stronger, and it gives us more stamina recovery, and it helps us sustain better in stamina. Alright, moving on to the main hand, and like I said, you can tank with this if you want to. You just need to change some things around. One of them happens to be a trait, or an enchant on your weapons. So starting with the main hand, we are using a Nirnhoned main hand with a frost damage enchant. You don't have to use frost damage here. You can use pretty much any enchant you want on the front bar. And the main reason why I use Frost is because Frost has a chance of CCing or chilling enemies, which will slow them, and it'll take a little bit of ice damage on, which is kind of nice. The other thing, reason why I use Nirnhoned, though, is so I can maximize my weapon and spell damage when I'm on the front bar. So this means other abilities I use that are magic-based, they get increased spell damage. Moving on to the bow, we are using an infused bow with a weapon spell damage enchant. This is going to maximize your weapon and spell damage, so you can take advantage of both. We are using magic abilities, mostly vampiric, some necrotic, so it kind of plays into adding to them and their capabilities of play. Moving on to skills now. Now, I'm going to go over the skills I have on my bar. Now, you don't have to use this same skill setup. This is what I run most of the time when I'm playing this character in either Overland, Dungeons, Delves, Public Dungeons, and even in some World Boss encounters. There are some skills I do change up to give me a better heal or better healing capabilities, that kind of stuff. But it really just comes down to how I choose to play. Alright, starting with the first ability we have on our bar, we are using Wrecking Blow. This is a very powerful damage ability. When you hit with this ability, it does a lot of damage on a single target, and then it grants you Empower for the next 5 seconds, increasing the damage of your next light attack. Right after you do a Wrecking Blow, you're going to go into a light attack anyways, so this just amplifies that damage. Then we have Blighted Blast Bones. Now this one, you summon a skeleton from the ground, it'll run out at your enemy. It explodes, dealing damage, disease damage to all enemies nearby, and applying Major Defile to them for 4 seconds, reducing their healing received by 30%. Then we have Carve. This applies a dot. So this does damage up front, and it does damage and damage over time, but this can hit multiple targets. So this isn't your atypical AoE. This is, I forget what they call them, but this is one that changes how things work in the AoE spectrum. So you can hit multiple targets, and each target you hit in the cone in front of you, in the 7-meter cone, will take the initial damage up front, and then they'll take that damage over time. Then we have Detonating Siphon. This is a really good ability for just dealing damage. So this will basically, when your Blighted Skeleton Blast Bones dies, you can use this and siphon disease damage from them, basically. And it does it in an AoE around them in a 5-meter radius. And as it's siphoning that life, or that life force from them and creating this disease damage, that disease damage is done over 12 seconds. But also on top of that, if it goes the full duration, the corpse will explode, dealing disease damage to all enemies nearby, while Slot Eater damage done is increased by 3%. Now, the next ability we have is Bellyful Mist, and this is a vampire ability. So basically, you'll turn into this misty cloud, and while you're in that form, you take 75% less damage, but you deal 940 magic damage to nearby enemies every 0.5 seconds for 4 seconds. And entering this form removes and grants immunity to all disabling and immobilizing effects, but you cannot be healed, and your magic recovery is disabled. So the thing that sucks about Bellyful Mist is when you use it, you go into a mist form. But while you're in that form, you will be taking a little bit of magic damage, and if you have one of the abilities you have for your class on the ground, it will actually do more damage. Next ability we have is our next vampire ability, and that is Devouring Swarm. This is a very powerful ultimate ability. A lot of people don't realize how powerful this can be. It's an instant cast area of effect, 10-meter radius around you for 7 seconds. When you activate it, a swarm of bats fly around you, dealing X amount of magic damage to nearby enemies every second for 7 seconds, but the bats heal you for X amount of health for each enemy they damage. So it's a really good, like, oh crap button, but at the same time it's also really good for dealing damage. Back bar, where we have a bow, or have our bow. We have our first ability, which is Venom Arrow. Now this is a very powerful ability. Of course, it deals damage up front, it deals damage over 10 seconds, and then it can also, if an enemy is casting an ability, they can be interrupted, set off balance, and stun for 3 seconds. Then we have Arrow Barrage. This one, you'll launch a volley of arrows in a basically 7-meter radius circle on the ground, and it deals X amount of damage every second for 8 seconds. It's also very nice for applying your enchantment on the back bar. Next ability we have is Unnerving Boneyard. Great ability. This one deals frost damage over 10 seconds, but it also applies Major Breach and Major Fracture to the enemy for that duration. And then it also can consume a corpse, dealing 50% more damage, and then it's also a synergy that somebody can activate, which is nice in group play. Next ability we have is our final vampire ability, and that is Invigorating Drain. Now this is going to consume life force from your enemies, dealing magic damage and restoring 16% of your missing health, and generating 5 ultimate every second for 3 seconds. When you activate Drain, the enemy is stunned for 3 seconds. That's the other reason why I like to use it. It's nice CC. And then we have our Beckoning Armor. This is how we get our Major Ward, Major Resolve. This increases spell and physical resist by 5,280 for 20 seconds. And then while active, enemies who strike you within ranged attacks will be pulled towards you once every 3 seconds. And it does create a corpse when the effect ends. Alright, next ability, and this is optional. You can actually put like Pestilence, Colossus, or one of your other Necromancer abilities here. But I do like to use Aggressive Warhorn. Even when I'm solo playing, I love this ability because it increases your max magic and stamina by 10% for 30 seconds. It also grants you minor or major force, increasing your critical damage by 15% for 10 seconds. If you didn't know, Khajiits get an extra 10% damage. And we have our CP set up in such a way that we get a higher critical rating or critical damage rating from everything, magic and physical. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, going over the Gravelord abilities, Pestilence Colossus, great ability, Venom Skull, Blighted Blast Bones, Unnerving Boneyard, Skeletal Archer, and Detonating Siphon are the skills I unlock here. And then, of course, I also get the passives. Moving on to Bone Tyrant, I do unlock all the abilities, starting with Ravenous Goliath. Ravenous Goliath with this build is great because it allows you to do AoE damage while you're in that form, and it also gives you a crap ton of health. Then we have Ruinous Scythe. It's a great way to heal yourself. It's one of the abilities I do swap out on the front bar. With Carve, I will put Ruinous Scythe here when I'm playing a tank. I also change out several other abilities and stuff, but I do like Ruinous Scythe. Then we, of course, have Beckoning Armor, Necrotic Potency, the Agony Totem, Ghostly Embrace, and then in the healing, or in the Living Death, we have Renewing Animation, Resistant Flesh, Hexproof, Enduring Undeath, Spirit Guardian, and Mortal Coil. Moving on to weapons, two-handed, we do have the ultimate and all these abilities unlocked. When it comes to class passives, by the way, before I forget, always unlock your class passives. These are very important because it allows you to utilize every ability you have, and you can take advantage of every passive you have. Two-handed, of course, like I was saying, ultimate, active abilities, and passives, you will want to unlock the passives, but when it comes to the ultimate, I do like to use Onslaught with this. This basically rips into the enemy, dealing X amount of physical damage. It does have a 7-meter range, and it also ignores the target's resistance, and it increases, it grants you physical and spell penetration for the direct damage attack equal to the amount of damage ignored. This is just a really good ability for that. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. It just depends. Wrecking Blow, Stampede, Carve, Executioner Strike, and then of course Rally are the skills I have unlocked. Moving on to the bow, again, ultimate, active abilities, and passives. Ultimate I take is Ballista. It's a great ability. You can just drop this out and it stays out, so you can continue doing your rotation or using other abilities while Ballista is going. Then we have Focused Aim. This is good for applying Minor Fracture. And then we have Arrow Barrage. Magnum Shot's a pretty good one in this one's case because it allows you to knock enemies 8 meters back. And then we have Bombard. This is a great CC ability. And then, of course, Venom Arrow. Moving on to Armor. Light Armor, we take the top 3 passives. The reason you're going to take these top 3 passives is because they play into your capabilities to utilize certain passives. And it's like Magic Return, Magic Recovery, Reduced Spell Cost, that kind of stuff. And, of course, Spell Warding gives you the higher spell resistance. Medium Armor, you're going to take the top 3 this time. The Improved Sneak really helps when you're playing Vampire and you're trying to feed off people and you're not wanting to get detected. Then Athletics. Heavy Armor, take all the passives. And then moving on to World Skills, Soul Magic, Ultimate, active abilities, and passives. I do take them all. I like Shatter Soul because it hits multiple targets when it ends. And I like Consuming Trap for resource management if I need it. Moving on to the Vampire skills, I do take the ultimate, active abilities, of course, and all the passives. This allows me to take full advantage of the Vampire itself and its active abilities, ultimate, all that stuff. And I do like playing with those skills. Moving on to Guild, Fighters Guild, I do unlock the ultimate, active abilities, and all passives here. The active abilities I like to use, or ultimate, is Dawnbreaker of Smiting. I like this for CC and crowd control, especially in things like in Maelstrom Arena, Dragonstar Arena, and also in the Black Rose Prison Arena. I like using a lot of CCs and crowd control so you can lock enemies down and do stuff like that. I also have Silver Leash for when I'm tanking if I need, or even if I'm just in a group and I need a pull. I have that, and then I have Ring of Preservation. This is a good group support ability. Then we have Evil Hunter, and then Barbed Trap. Moving on to Mage's Guild. Ice Comet's another great CC ability. It is an ultimate, but it does cost a lot. And then, of course, we have Inner Light, Structured Entropy, Scalding Ruin, and Balance. I do use Balance sometimes when I'm tanking. And then, of course, all the passives here. Cedric Order, I do take all the passives, of course, and the abilities I like to use is Temporal Guard for When I'm not using the Vampire Armor, the Vampire Lord's Armor, I will use Temporal Guard. The other one's just as good, though, when your Precognition is better for you, but this does give you that minor protection, but you already have it from the armor. Time Freeze, another great ability for CC, crowd control. Crushing Weapons, just really good if you're looking for a damage ability that can heal you. And then we have Race Against Time. This is a great way for Minor Force, just like Trap Beast or Barb Trap. And then we also have Symbiosis for if we need to heal, or if we're in an area or doing something in a group, and maybe the healer's having some trouble struggling with keeping people alive. You can actually activate this and heal you and an ally. It's really kind of a nice trade-off. And then we have the Introspection. This is a great resource management skill, especially for if you're tanking and you have resource issues. This can be a great skill for that, to help you get used to resource management. And then of course we have all the passives here again. Moving on to Undaunted, the active abilities I use here is Sanguine Altar, and I do use this quite a bit because I feel it fits within the vampire theme of life, like draining life and everything like that. So I do like to use this. Shadow Soak's a really good CC. Well, not really just a good CC. It's a good CC with damage and everything like that. It's just great for that. Then we have Inner Beast, which is our primary taunt for when we're tanking. We have Spiked Bone Shield. This is one of the other abilities I will swap out for another one for when I'm tanking, so I have a good damage shield. And it also redirects damage back to the enemy, which is really nice. So, and then of course we have Mystic Orb if we want a group support skill to give people resources. Also make sure you get the passives from the Undaunted skill line. Moving on to assault skills, under the Alliance War, we do take Aggressive Warhorn, Echoing Vigor, and Razor Caltrops. And then under support, Replenishing Barrier, Efficient Purge, and Mystic Guard. And then of course I do take the Magic Aid if I'm using any of those abilities. Moving on to Khajiit's passives. Khajiit, any race is good at this, but Khajiit and Dark Elf are exceptionally good because they have that more hybridized racial setup. So that's why I like to play one. I play one. And the other reason is because there's a story behind this character and how they came to be and all this kind of stuff. It's really cool. But you get Robustness. This gives you health recovery, stam recovery, and mag recovery. Lunar Blessing gives you increased max health, magic, and stamina by 825. And then Feline Ambush gives you that increased critical damage and critical healing by 10%, and it decreases your detection radius and stealth by 3 meters. This is what makes them this build really cool for playing a vampire. Moving on to Crafting, Alchemy, Medicinal Use, awesome passive ability you can get, and then under Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that stuff, I'm going to go ahead and go over CP. Starting with the Red Tree, we have 56 in the Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. 18 in the Spell Shield, increasing your spell resistance by 1729. Moving on over to the Middle Red Tree, we have 31 in the Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 in the Hardy, reducing your physical poison disease damage by 10%. 43 into Elemental Defender, reducing Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%, and I should say 43 in both of those. Moving on, 40 in the Bastion, increasing the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%, and then 20 into Heavy Armor Focus. This is going to increase your physical resistance by 1900 while wearing 5 or more pieces of heavy armor. Moving on to the Green Tree, we have 40 in the Warlord, reducing break free cost by 16%. We have 16 in the Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 in the Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 16%. And then moving on to the Middle Tree here, because we are using Invigorating and we're a Khajiit and we get that extra amount of recovery, Magicka and Stamina recovery, I do play off of that. So I put 75 in the Mooncalf and 43 in Arcanus. This is going to give me 14% Stamina recovery. This is going to give me 10% Mag recovery. I don't put anything into Tenacity, even though, I could, but I use both Magic and Stamina in the build, and I want to kind of take advantage of that. Moving on to the last Green Tree, we have 40 in the Tumbling, reducing your cost to dodge roll by 16%. 40 in the Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. And then moving into the final blue area, or blue trees, we have 43 in the Bless. This increases your healing done by 10%. We do have 23 in Elfborn. This increases your critical damage and critical healing done with magic abilities by 10%. And then we have 43 into Elemental Expert. This increases your Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. Moving on, 35 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases the light and heavy attacks of two-handed and your bow by 20%, which is really kind of good when you think about it, because you will be using some heavy attacks every once in a while, and light attacks a lot. So 40 into Master at Arms. This increases your direct damage done by 16%. You also unlock Retaliation, Reposit, and Butcher. Those are good passives, by the way. Mighty 43, this increases physical poison disease damage by 10%. 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing critical damage and critical healing of stamina abilities by 10%. And then 20 into Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 9%. So the build is a very interesting hybrid, and it's actually quite powerful. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to jump over to the layer of Marsalek, and I'm going to run through this and just show you guys how this build can work and how it can play. And it's actually quite interesting. So. And I do have many other builds coming out this week. Most of them are going to be more solo-friendly builds before I start doing things like actual tanks, healers, and damage dealers. This is more solo-friendly type builds this week, and just some fun stuff. Really? Oh, I didn't even get to use my blast bones. They took it away from me. Oh well. Oh well. Now the place I'm probably going to die is at the spider boss. But I'll probably make it past Celine's bear form. I don't even know which one I'm hitting. Just die. Die! There we go. Got some ultimates that I can use now. I'll die. And the main reason why I like this build so much, and I know a lot of people are probably wondering, God, man, that's like a pretty cheesy build, is it's just fun. I mean, there's a big difference between playing a build because, you know, it's cool or it's exciting or whatever, and this is just, like I said, it's just fun. So, and it does allow for some unique experiences when it comes to playing like different things, playing against different things in the game, and I really like that it has that uniqueness to it. And yes, this is normal difficulty. This isn't veteran difficulty. I'm not going to say that I couldn't solo this in Veteran. I can, but it just takes so much longer to solo content in Veteran than it does in Normal. That's why I don't do it in my preliminary showing of a class or a build or something like that. Oh no, I'm dying. Just drink a potion. And just so you guys can see, I got an 894 mag recovery and 1509 stam recovery when I pop my tripod. But it's one of the reasons why I like that one potion that gives you health and stamina back, because as you can see, I'm not like burning through magic. Just shoot her with a few arrows.
Am I to understand you're a follower of Zen? Return my freedom, and I will get your wrongs done here. Unbind her, Corinda.
Unwind. I shall loosen my hold on you.
Now for payment in kind. It's my turn to study your insides of your body.
Get out! I warn you of my necessity.
Celine, no! Don't let me get Corinda!
Ow. Really? Yeah. Yes, dang it. Gosh darn it. Oh man, that hurt. That hurt. And you don't, like I said, the abilities I use are just because this is what I play when I play on live. I'm like, these are the abilities I use, so. But you don't have to use those same abilities. Again, there's every skill I showed you that is unlocked. The reason I have them unlocked is so I can use them, and you can swap in and out skills whenever you need. But that is the Vampire Lord, my friends, and I hope you guys liked it. I really do enjoy playing this build. It's one of my, I wouldn't say favorite builds, but it is one of the builds I find a lot more fun sometimes to play, and it's really interesting when you find a build that you can really connect to and relate to, and the way it plays and its playability, and it just makes the game fun. So. But that's it for the build, guys. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.